That's okay. Welcome, 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 everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Friday, April 15th, which is also Good Friday for those who celebrate Good Friday. This is another exciting episode of Candid Career Convo. Here with me is Shalima, obviously our co host, as we chat every month. And our special guest this month is Gwenna Kadima. So thank you so much for joining us. And to begin, we're going to start with our land acknowledgement, and Shalim is going to go ahead and take over for that.
Yeah, well, Shelley and I both live on the west coast of Canada, and specifically on the land of the Coast Salish peoples. And if we want to get to know a bit more about the history of the territory that we're on, it really is connected to the people of the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen First Nations, who have been here traditionally and continue to steward and care for the land that we have the privilege of joining you all from, also known as Surrey, BC. So way over in the West Coast. And it's always nice to have people from all different areas of Canada. And I think, especially as we enter into this conversation, as we do every single month, is taking that time to reflect on where you're located, the history of the land that you're on, but also the history of the peoples that have traditionally moved on that land and continue to steward the land that you may be on as well.
Thank you so much, Shalima. And next, we'd like to give a little background on the name Kaiso Careers and also a little bit about Shalima and myself. So, for those of you who've joined us in the past, you may know that Kaiso Careers, the name of it is actually comes from some of our background. Shalima and myself, our parents are both born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago. And to kind of honor our history and our heritage, we chose the name Kaiso Careers. And the name is actually comes from the West African influence of music, and so it's a bit of a fusion of Cambele music from West Africa and the Latin and the Indian fusion of music that was played in Trinidad and Tobago. And it was used to help those who were enslaved navigate through the country with storytelling and kind of some trickery from those who enslaved them. So, with that kind of in mind, we wanted to again create this space so that we could help support other BIPOC folks, Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are building their careers. We wanted to create this platform so we could lend a space for folks to just highlight the amazing work that they're doing in and around this community across Turtle Island, right? So within Canada and North America, all across. And yeah, we think folks are doing amazing work and we want to highlight what they're doing. So that's essentially how we came up with this idea of Candid Career Convos. A little bit about my background is my usual 9 to 5 job is working at Langara College as an instructor in the Co-op and Career Services Department. Outside of that, I work in various spaces doing EDI work, equity, diversity, inclusion work. I'm someone who's passionate about business, and when I have an opportunity to talk about business and helping folks navigate through their new businesses or entrepreneurship, I get very excited about it. And finally, I'm a relatively new mom. I have a 6 month old, so that's kind of my full time job right now, in addition to some of the other fun stuff that I do. Go ahead, Shalima.
Sure. So I am currently a partner in an organization called HRX. We do everything related to equity, diversity, and inclusion. We're a consulting firm in that space. So we support organizations in doing audits, understanding really the lay of the land when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion in their organization. But we also do training and facilitating and I'm heavily involved in programming and development in that area. So just love all that work. I'm also a coach. And so on the side, I coach people and support them in their careers and leadership journeys as well. And yeah, that brings us to what we're doing today on the side, I guess, together, Shelly. Candid Career Convo, and excited to welcome our guest, Gwenna Kadima here today with us.
Thank you, Shelley.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. So, Gwenna, you have such a amazing and exciting background. Not only what you do, in your regular 9 to 5, but outside of that, some of your passion projects and, some of your writings and all that exciting stuff. So, one of the questions I'd like to start off with is asking you, what's something that you would like to share with our audience? Something that you would want them to know about you and the work that you do?
So first off, thank you, Shalima and Shelley, for having me. I do want to call out, you probably saw briefly with my bio there, but I'm actually based out in Toronto and want to acknowledge that these are the lands of the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat people. So, man, I mean, this is a way to really describe sort of the work that I'm doing, and I feel like it's so multifaceted and continues to grow. And a lot of it has been based off of this continual journey of trying to find and build spaces where folks like myself can do their best work and be their authentic selves and just baseline feel safe, because there's so many places, especially professionally, where that's not the case. So the thing that I think would be really important is really recognizing that a lot of this work is around sort of undoing the experiences that I've had and those around me through a variety of different forums, but all with the goal of sort of that holistic focus on inclusion, especially along, although I have multiple marginalized identities that I carry, especially along race and ethnicity.
Um, let's dive right into, you mentioned undoing some of the wrongdoings that are done. So, do you mind sharing a little bit about that? Because one of the things we often talk about is what is it like to be Black, Indigenous, or a person of color navigating through some of the white spaces? So, there's oftentimes harm that we all know we've experienced in some of those spaces. So, what's some of the undoing or unlearning that you actually help folks with?
Yeah, so I think for me, and again, a lot of it's based in, of course, starting with my own lived experience, but also understanding those who are marginalized in ways I don't identify with. And so a lot of this work that I do is predominantly focused, I guess I'll back up. So the two main hats that I wear. One, I work at Accenture. So there I am a consultant in our talent and organization practice. I've been at Accenture for a little over 3 years now. And I predominantly partner with our clients in really focusing on how do they transform their people organizations. So, looking at an inclusive approach to every step of the employee experience, understanding, of course, DEI strategy, but also tangible program delivery, and then also the use of technology to transform their HR organizations and enable them to make more data driven decisions to better equip their people. That's the one side of it. And for me, that's kind of the macro side of really inserting myself into these spaces and ensuring that they are focusing on inclusive cultures. And we can talk about some of the stuff that I've gone through, but really making sure that they're aware of the experiences of their marginalized people. Then also, like you had alluded to, so the work that I do outside of my 9 to 5, I'm a BIPOC career activator. So in this, I essentially partner with different organizations to ensure that especially their pre and early career BIPOC talent are supported and equipped to really succeed and navigate these professional spaces. Because in getting to that question of what are some of the undoings, for a lot of us, we don't have the resources or support equipping us, whether it's we're the first in our family to go to post secondary, or we're the only Black person or BIPOC person in our organizations, don't know what mentorship is versus sponsorship versus coaching, and how all of those can really equip you to reach those higher levels and not just have the quintessential experience of diversity at the bottom, are all really areas that I'm focusing on, both macro through Accenture at the organizational level, but also on a smaller scale and more individually and micro, working with small groups and different organizations to enable their BIPOC talent to succeed.
Mm.
What are you finding as like the common denominator in those organizations that actually see like, hey, yes, we need your services, Glenna, because we realize that there is a gap in who's there and the diversity that's there and what's actually being seen at all different levels of the organization. Like what sets them apart that they can actually see the benefit of what you're doing?
Yeah, and I think the main thing that's a common thread is that there is, regardless of how they identify, leaders who are intentional about this space and who want to make it work. Because I know many folks who are entry level or mid career who really see the emphasis and really understand the importance of doing this work. However, unless, and it's unfortunate sometimes, but unless you have the support and the sponsorship from those senior stakeholders, the folks at that highest table, you're not going to be able to get to the level of nuance to look past just, okay, we need to hire, for example, more Indigenous people. We don't care if they come in at entry level or senior level. We don't care about retention or advancement. Baseline, just understanding of recruitment. That's a maturity problem. So the organizations that are more mature in this space really have that senior leadership advocacy and also the space and resources to allow their folks to dive into these topics in a sustainable way. Because the second thing is to put your money where your mouth is, right? This is a very strange time. Like, I tend to refer to this as the awkward adolescence of DEI topics, because I know both of you know that this has been a field of organizational interest for quite some time. But with the events of the last 2, 3 years, now everybody gets it. We thankfully, for the most part, can get past the basic conversation of one, the moral imperative, but also, of course, the business need and how this is better for business to actually prioritize diversity, inclusion, and equity. But we're still at this point where, although that is understood, it hasn't been actually enabled. So organizations that, one, have the senior support, but two, also have the resources to say, okay, we need to invest in this and treat it like a business priority, like they do all other parts of their business. Those are the ones that I'm able to have this conversation with, where we get past just the DEI strategy that goes in a drawer, or congratulations, we did our unconscious bias training for the year. Getting to a bit more of a focus on how do we actually equip our employees at different parts of the business in really tangible ways that impact them.
I guess one of the questions that comes up is because you've alluded to the whole idea of some lip service and the checkbox and all that stuff. So when you have an organization that approaches you and says, "Oh yeah, we want to do this work," do you tend to vet them to see where they are, as far as like, are they in that infancy stage, or have they kind of moved on a little further from that? Like, do you carry them through, or do you just, like, I'm curious about, are you kind of choosy on who you work with when it comes to this? Because it's so labor intensive, as we all
Mm-hmm.
know. We're giving so much by having the conversations, that, again, when folks are in this infancy stage of it and they don't know what they don't know, it can also be very harmful to
Yeah.
BIPOC folks. It can be triggering. It can induce some trauma, right? So I'm curious, do you vet some of these organizations before you dive in there and agree to work with them?
Yeah, so there's the two angles of this, right? Because I work with these organizations, both Accenture and independently. So on the Accenture side, I say there's less of a vetting because, of course, we're like working with these large organizations. It's not just me who's on the team who's delivering these services. It's a large, massive institution that has support and is equipped across the world to tackle everything from infancy through to some of the more mature spaces, which we don't often see in Canada, but definitely in other geographies. So with that, there's less of a vetting. Of course, a lot of this work starts with a current state assessment to really understand, okay, where are you at before we get to solutioning? Because it can tend to be really reactive. For example, something will happen in the news, or there will be some sort of external PR issue, and they're like, oh my gosh, now we need this, now we care. So the conversation tends to happen where we end up reining them back to say, okay, so this is a sustainable thing for you to do. Let's actually understand where you're at now and plot out a broader approach for you that isn't just dealing with this one point in time, but ensuring that you're embedding this into the fabric of your organization. Me, on the individual side, I am much more choosy, and I think it's something that I've organically built into my organization because I offer career development workshops, seminars, and services for BIPOC talent. And that, specifically in the way that it's worded, kind of detracts the organizations who are at those very infant stages. They need their strategies, they need their baseline training, they need their big data assessments. It's an area I may explore in the future. My business is something that's been growing and I'm excited to take along. So we'll see where it ends up. And if this is full time, I'll think about what that vetting is. But by virtue of being very clear that the work that I do is not to benefit self declared allies or otherwise declared allies and is not for PR reasons. It's explicitly to ensure that the marginalized folks that should be at the heart of this are receiving benefit. That organically tends to sort of weed out some of the organizations that are just doing it for performative reasons. Because again, it's back to the put your money where your mouth is side.
Absolutely. Um, just along those sides, could you tell us and tell our audience a little bit more about how you started your own practice? Because I mean, I know you've got a beautiful kind of HR background, a bit of a tech background, and you're passionate about creating spaces to support new grads that are BIPOC as they transition through their careers. So, how did you come about merging some of these passions?
Yeah, so I think what really enabled it was first off, understanding my own experiences. I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta. I was very often the only Black person in many spaces. I'm also mixed race, right? Like my mom is white Canadian, my dad is from the DRC, so the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I grew up with a very westernized upbringing. I felt very insecure and very unaware of my background as a Black person and everything that came with being Congolese. So, always having this feeling of sort of othering, both internalized, but also due to just being the one, has been in the back of my head forever. And so, where it really started was in post secondary, knowing I love the concept of organizational design, looking at HR, how people function. To me, companies are like National Geographic. Like, it's absolutely amazing to me to see how do all these folks work together to build something great and how do they create the structures to do so effectively. Knowing I had that interest and also realizing that organizations were starting to talk about these ideas of identity and belonging and addressing some of the things that I was trying to navigate personally on my own, that's what kind of made it merge. And that's what really enabled me to understand DEI as the place that I wanted to start in. So moved to Toronto because at that time DEI jobs were not exactly prevalent, especially early career back in Edmonton. And from the amazing practitioners I knew, hearing their stories, it didn't feel sustainable or safe for me to start in that space. So moved to Toronto, found that that was the place where all the jobs were happening. Thankfully, due to part of my network, came to Accenture. But this really sort of blends into how I started my own business because a couple of months after joining Accenture, myself and a couple of other very early career folks started Accenture Canada's Black Employee Resource Group. The African American ERG in the US was absolutely bumping. It had been around for 20 plus years and they were big and they were recognized and appreciated and resourced, but there wasn't an understanding of the unique context of here in Canada. So, in starting that, knowing the things I've been involved in post secondary, I took on the role of National Recruitment Programs Lead, which I still carry to this day. And that enabled me to run programming that really allowed me to connect directly with candidates, regardless of career level, but especially, and folks within Accenture know I tend to bias towards students, but really focusing on BIPOC student candidates and Black students and understanding their experiences. And I was so frustrated realizing that these students years later were going through the exact same things I was dealing with of going to their career centers and often not getting the supports of their non-Black peers or not even realizing the breadth of career opportunities available out there for them, going back to the classic immigrant parent trifecta of doctor, lawyer, engineer perpetually. And also realizing that a lot of the things that I had internalized, like internalized racism and lack of confidence, and really not having that support network was prevalent with a lot of them too. So having all of that and kind of using Accenture and being equipped with their resources to have some impact, we've done some amazing programming, but I want to take it further. So about a year ago, I was asked to keynote an event, and from there, built the foundation of a lot of my workshop material now, my three-part core model, and it grew and it developed. And I had a lot of support from folks who said, "No, Gwenna, first off, you should be getting paid for this, and second, this could really be something." So understanding the experiences of those students and realizing that unfortunately they're still going through a lot of the same things that I was, and now being in a position to help and ensuring that it's something that's sustainable for me and not just side of the desk is really what equipped me to start to do this work and just build this passion and grow this into something bigger.
So in this work that you're able to do, you know, you've been able to identify some of the you know, hurdles or some of the challenges that you've experienced and kind of bring that into being able to share that with others who are now going through that and, you know, hopefully alleviate some of those hurdles that you've experienced. And I'm curious, like, what are some of the biggest things that you're seeing within BIPOC students or like BIPOC career changers maybe that are coming to you that is that hurdle to get over? And like, what is the outcome afterwards they're able to get over that hurdle?
So I think a lot of it is really around sort of the network side, because I think that, well, I tend to see that a lot of folks are, one, afraid of the concept of networking. And for folks culturally, it may be awkward or it may be uncomfortable. The idea of, oh, you expect me as a new grad or a newcomer or somebody in a completely different field to just feel comfortable reaching out to this random high potential or high influence person and just ask them for a coffee chat, ask them for their time. No, like the concept of that is very foreign to a lot of people. And so we tend to have these really small, close knit networks that aren't always built with the individuals that can allow us to make that next step and to open up doors for us. Like I mentioned earlier, mentorship versus sponsorship. A lot of us will tend to have these sort of peer relationships, but taking that additional step to actually open doors with the folks who can make change in our careers is one of the main things that we tend to address and really help folks to build confidence in, of just do the cold call, just reach out, or ask the person that you know who knows that person for an introduction. Be comfortable with taking up space, because I think it also is something that happens where we don't want to bother people. It's really ingrained in a lot of our cultures, right? Of, especially for women, be quiet, be seen, not heard. The idea of being somebody who speaks up in rooms with authority or steps out or oversteps is very much something that's foreign to us, but it's necessary in careers, especially here. So really building that confidence of, no, build that network, have those brave asks, and just ultimately take up space happens quite a bit, and it unlocks a lot for folks.
Yeah, I think that taking up space is such a challenging one. I think, I mean, coming from my perspective of having immigrant parents and kind of being told, like, you know, put your head down and do the grind, like your work will speak for yourself. Oftentimes you think that that's enough to take up that space, but it's not. You actually have to actively speak about yourself. And to your point, that's not always the natural way of being for many folks. Yeah. And you know, like we can think about some of the things that within our backgrounds or from our cultural perspectives could create those barriers and looking at how to, you know, navigate, you know, current workspaces and corporate settings. What about like some of the things that actually coming from our cultural backgrounds are strengths in navigating that space?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good call out, because I think like a lot of this conversation too, we forget the positives and we forget like our resilience and our ability to persevere despite these systems that are clearly not made for us, that are built with barriers every step of the way, even before you start. We're still here. And so I think that would really be it, Shalima, our ability to, because of that idea ingrained in us of you work hard. It's unfortunate, but the work twice as hard for half as much, we still do it. Like, we are ready to put in the work. We are ready to persevere. We are resilient folks during times where everything's telling us, no, we keep going.
Mm.
And even within that, and because a lot of us were from these really collectivist societies, right? This idea of when you come up yourself, you bring up everybody else with you, you create space for others. And
Mm.
so what I see is so common is everybody's ready to mentor. Everybody's ready to be able to have those conversations with other folks. And I think it's something that's more prevalent now. I know that we've had periods where there's this idea of, okay, there's only going to be space for one of us in the room. We need to fight and we need to infight. And it happens quite often still. But I do see a shift, especially knowing I work with pre-career and early career. There's really this expand the pie mentality versus just take your slice. So it's something that, like, that focus on society, focus on those around us, expanding the concept of family. I find that really shows up in how we take care of each other in these spaces and build community.
Yeah. Yeah, and like definitely the concept of, well, I guess really abundance, right? So is
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, how can I support others? How can I create more for the people around me? Versus one of scarcity where it's, oh, like we are the only one and we have to protect that space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think, that like that mentality can really create a lot of that toxicity that people experience as well, not just from white folks, but also from others that have been like have gone through corporate systems where they have pitted people against each other and not created that space of abundance.
Yeah. It's interesting how like trauma really plays into this, right? And the way that we treat each other in organizations, because I was shocked when I was first understanding the world of EDI to know that there were practitioners, like late career practitioners, who have been in this space for a long time and who are saying very similar things and have very similar motivations to me at that time, being 20 years old, saying, this is ridiculous. Why are all these things happening? And getting these like mentors and coaches and folks that I look up to who are like, I've been at this for a long time. And so in a sense, there are those situations where unfortunately we are stuck with a scarcity mindset, or we've been so deeply tokenized that it isn't always something where we're able to think about others, or that isn't first because we're in this act of self preservation. It's something that I just want to call out of like, for the folks who've trailblazed in this space, and also even knowing that the two of you are further along in your careers and you've done plenty in these spaces as well, that it takes its toll. And Shelly, I love what you had said earlier of like, really recognizing that this work is hard and it is something that requires a lot of you. And the way that I always put it is that there's nothing more oppressive than expecting the oppressed to teach you about how you oppress them. And so, really thinking about this work and how, to my earlier point about resilience, for the folks who make it through and who have that abundance mentality, Shalima, who are able to, even in these spaces where they're tired or they've been burnt, are still at it and still helping equip everybody else in the house. It's
Mm,
so cool to see, and really something that I just love about us is in the way that we are as Black folks, and really just anybody who's marginalized and still taking up space in these places.
mm,
That kind of, to me, sounds like a really good segue to one of the questions we often ask, which is tapping back into community and your culture, and how has your own culture helped you navigate the work that you do? How has it helped support you in the work that you're doing?
So it's funny to think about this because I feel like I've really been between cultures a lot, and that for me, I wasn't one of those people that grew up constantly eating Congolese food or constantly around other Congolese folks, and I had a very westernized upbringing. And so this idea of culture is something that I've even had to really like navigate and understand what it means for me, even just in the build up to this session. I knew this question was coming and I'm like, okay, how do I really quantify this? How do I articulate what this means? And so really, I think it's in building these spaces here, right? And I don't want to overlook what the like grew up here Black Canadian experience is, and understanding that there's something in that where you're between multiple worlds, you're navigating various things both culturally and otherwise about your identity. And so recognizing the long journey I've been on, I've talked about undoing internalized racism, I've talked about sort of navigating these spaces where you're constantly othered, knowing about my own experiences and the folks that have been able to help me along the way, whether it's in Edmonton or now here in Toronto, or as we get more global, the folks that I'm meeting everywhere where we're all on the same page and we want to make this work. Really recognizing that experience and how being able to create opportunities for other folks to maybe come to the answers that I eventually found a little bit earlier is something that really drives me. And the way that I frame my business, especially when I'm working directly with students, is I just want to be the big sister they never had, right? The person who can help them in these journeys that are often really isolating and really lonely, whether or not we perfectly identify together, but there's that common thread of our experiences as BIPOC folks.
Mm, mm,
It's beautiful. I love that, being the big sister. Um, yeah, and it kind of reminds me of that whole idea of what you mentioned earlier about having that communal or collectivist kind of culture, right? So we are helping to lift all of us up rather than just saying, well, what can I do to get myself ahead, right? Again, that whole idea of expanding the pie and that abundance mindset. That's so beautiful. And I think I can't speak for Shalima, but I would suspect, given that, we were both born and raised here in Canada and our parents are from Trinidad, we understand that idea of, yeah, walking that tightrope of you've got that pull from one side of your culture from your parents, and at the same time, you're navigating through this space of this Canadian culture, whatever that really means, right? And it can be challenging and exhausting, and it's kind of like a tug of war at times. So I can definitely appreciate what you're saying when you think about your culture and how it's helped you as well. Shalima, I don't know if you. Oh,
mm.
sorry. Go ahead.
I think like even as we think, oh yeah, yeah. What you talked about, kind of like navigating like multiple realities around you, and like kind of being in the between of that. And I think that's like I absolutely could relate to that experience completely. And I think one of the things that I've always thought was a superpower is the ability to code switch, because I'm like, I know exactly like this the space for this, the space for that. How do I have to be in order to connect with these folks over here? And you know, but it kind of got to a point where it's like, well, is that a superpower? Like, should I actually have to be accessing that superpower? Like,
So regularly too.
you
Yeah.
know, like no, because like that's depleting all my other superpowers. So, um, like to your point of like getting people to be able to experience things or like understand how things work early on, it's like having that frank discussion that these are things that you may encounter in the workplace, and you may recognize that there are moments where you want to code switch because you want to be able to fit in here. What does that mean for you? Like, is that something that you're choosing to do or that you feel you have to do? Is that then taking away from how you want to show up in workspaces authentically? And, what does that mean to be able to show up authentically within workspaces? And yeah, and just being aware of those decisions, those like little micro decisions we make every single day. You're in workspaces where you may be a minority within that space as well. So
Mm.
yeah, it's certainly an internal discussion sometimes, but like it's really great when can become an external one that other people can relate to those experiences.
Yeah, it's funny because my undergraduate thesis was on code switching
Mm.
and the way that Black women, also this was not scripted, by the way. We did not set this up. Uh,
I had no idea. That's really cool.
This is
yeah,
awesome.
no, it was on code switching, specifically looking at the experiences of Black women in Edmonton and the way that they shift their identity, they shift their behavior, they shift their physical appearance, the way they speak, all of those components to
Mm.
survive and succeed in these spaces that, where, especially in Edmonton, they are the minority. And
Mm.
so it was a funny thing. And maybe this was like my, at the time, very young naivete being like, okay, reading through all this stuff, like understanding all the data, seeing the very clear themes that had come up about the ways that folks code switch and the toll that it takes, because it isn't something that we should have to do, but inevitably it is a reality. I remember just thinking to myself of like, when I moved to Toronto, I'm not going to do any of this. I won't need to. It's fine. Like, I will not fall into any of it. And then, of course, when I move here and I start in corporate Toronto, which is very different than corporate Edmonton, and start to really recognize and have this moment after at least 6+ months of being like, wait a minute, they got me. I'm doing it too. So, really seeing that, like, it is a really insidious thing. And it's something that we have this survival instinct, and it's pretty great that we do, that we know this is how we make it through these spaces. But also for me, sort of having this reconciling of why. And to your point, sometimes it helps us succeed in these certain rooms. It's an act of self preservation and safety. But at other times, and what I found for myself was that it wasn't always necessary, but it became my default because of a lot of internalized things and how I had come to see the definition of what was appropriate or what is seen as successful or who's allowed to fit in. And so that was the really big newsflash of, maybe part of it was coming to Toronto, but also a better sense of self, of like sort of expanding that concept of how I can show up authentically and testing with folks of, okay, if I be a little bit more Gwenna in this conversation, will there be consequences? Because
Mm.
it's funny talking to some of the people that I connected with really early on in my time in Accenture. And they're like, Gwenna, you were a robot. You were like a husk of a person. Everything was to the point, knew nothing about you. Let's get down to business. You spoke very professionally, and everything was like completely rigid. But now there's a lot more of me in there. And it's something that I've had to dip my toe in after, maybe it was a lot of the academic side of just seeing the data of the consequence for us being ourselves in these spaces, and again really internalizing that. But as I started to really try and step out to be more me, I'm really glad, first off, that I was in an environment where it was accepted, because that's not always the case. But it's really helped me to see that it's not just a matter of professional success, but it's also personal alignment, and not getting lost in all of these identities, and the less that we have to be one person here, another person here. Although it's a chameleon superpower, it does play with your psyche a little bit. And so what I've really realized is that as I become stronger in sort of my professional space and have a better grasp of my career and have built that network and that professional safety net, where even if things don't work out at Accenture, I'll have somewhere else to go. I'm building my own thing. I'm good. That has also allowed me to be more authentic and to take more risks. Like, I remember summer of 2020, there was a lot of showboating. There was a lot of times where I had to be the token Black person to speak about the Black experience in Canada. And the first conversations were very safe. But by the end of it, part of me was just like, let's just do it. I'm just going to say it and see what happens. And I really, in my head, was like, I'm the martyr of this conversation. I am going to speak and give at least one authentic perspective of what's happening for our Black folks here in this organization, and hope you take it. If there's consequences for me, by that point, I was like, I'll go somewhere else where my voice is wanted. I'll go somewhere else where you actually want to listen. And so thankfully, again, it was a space where they did want to listen, and it was received with appreciation and gratitude. But after hitting that point of, okay, now I'm able to move more me and take those risks and show up authentically, it's helped me out a lot, both personally and professionally.
Mm.
Wow. That's so beautiful. Maggie is giving you a high five there. I love it. Um, what you were speaking of, being able to bring your authentic self to the office, excuse me, and having the organization support you do that, kind of leads me to the next question, which we were talking about before we started the session, which was about this idea of this mass resignation that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
you know, globally, where folks are saying, enough is enough. I don't want to necessarily be in an organization that doesn't support me the way I need to be supported. So I just wanted to gather some of your thoughts on this idea, the reality of folks saying, you know what, if I can't bring my full self to the office, I'm going to find another organization that will allow me to, or whatever it is that's kind of prompting it. So yeah, your thoughts
Yeah,
on it.
yeah. It's everything about the Great Resignation has just been a fascinating impact on organizations,
Mhm.
and it's enabled a lot more. It's a lot more of a candidates market for us as the resources in these spaces. We have more say. There is a fight for talent. There is scarcity in a lot of places where organizations realize they have to sweeten the deal and whatever that means from a total rewards perspective, not just compensation, but we're talking things like flexibility. We're talking about overall benefits and support, culture, all of these different dimensions. So I'm so glad that we've hit this point, of course, catalyzed by a awful, unfortunate global event, but now there's starting to be more of a recognition from organizations that they are responsible for these things. And we as talent, because it is such a priority to be in these spaces where we feel safe, we feel like we belong, we're equipped to do our work, and there's a sense of well-being and security, that has really flipped the script. And so what I find is really interesting, because there's a couple of different components, is one around flexibility, where there's just now a realization that we can work flexibly. So many different jobs were thrust into a realm or a way of doing business that they didn't even think was possible. They didn't even consider or didn't even want to touch, even if it was raised. Now we have the clear case that a lot of our work, especially in these corporate spaces, can be done fully remote. And we've also proven that we'll still get our things done in a lot of situations, especially talking to eccentric clients. There's the funny side of like, oh, now we need to kind of rein folks back in because everybody's being way too productive. And now we're seeing the impact on well-being and mental health. So how do we create these boundaries? So that conversation about flexibility, the business case is there. And for a lot of folks, it is the world of a difference for their careers. But then we also think about what it's like from just a sense of safety, psychological safety and inclusion. And there was a lot of dialogue happening, especially back last year when folks were starting to trickle back into the workplace and organizations were doing their big claims of either we're fully remote forever, which some did not pan out, as we've now seen, or the okay, we're going to be opening offices by this date. Folks were really starting to question, do I even want to be there? And there was a lot, especially for BIPOC folks, those who experience the oddly named micro, because the impact is very macro of these microaggressions. Do I want to subject myself to that? I'm good sitting here in my Lulus, just hanging out, doing my work, choosing the folks that I talk to, all of this stuff. And so it's something that a lot of folks are realizing, that those environments that, yeah, we were working on it, but they weren't actually as safe as we thought. And now there really needs to be some tangible effort from organizations to prioritize inclusion and get to that minutia, because a lot of it is around the subtle things of, oh, somebody noticed when I changed my hair, I'm getting weird looks, or oh, there's that person who I raised an employee relations complaint about, but I still am navigating walking past them in the halls. Or, okay, client facing, gonna walk into another room that I know is predominantly white folks and I'll be the only Black person. Let's see how this goes, because we always wonder. So, really thinking about us as folks who are marginalized and have to deal with a lot of that psychological lack of safety or just the second guessing, which can be exhausting. Really considering that for our employees and giving them the space to choose how they work. So what I find is interesting on that part of the conversation, though, is we see that there's a lot of folks who are deferring to, okay, I want to work fully remote. I want the flexibility. I don't want to be in office anymore. But that can have its consequences from a professional perspective, which I think often as BIPOC folks, we don't really think about, right? Of building those networks. The idea of the big business decisions don't happen in the office, they happen after hours on the social side, which again is unfair, totally misaligned from meritocracy, but that's the reality we deal with. So it's really this conversation of, for the folks who choose to take these more flexible arrangements, how do we ensure that they are still progressing and they aren't left behind? Some thoughts.
Yeah, it's funny because, as soon as you talked about the hair, I was thinking, like, in my current organization, it's not an issue. I actually work with in an organization that is like led by people of color. And I've never worked in an organization where like the majority of people are actually people of color. So this is, I don't have that fear if we were to come in person, and we're fully remote. But in every other place I've worked, the immediate thought to going back to the office, if I was in that position of working from home and then having to go back, would be, someone is going to be sitting behind me staring at my hair to see what is new. It's like, I just don't want to have the conversation about whether I've cut my hair or not or done something different. Like it's completely irrelevant and I don't want to talk to you about it.
Mhm.
But those little things they just pile up and then could create that atmosphere of, oh, that again, or like that question again, where it's like, that you're being othered in that space.
Mhm.
So like could absolutely relate to that feeling of, oh, finally you get to be home in your own space. Whatever I have on my walls, that's going to come through and you're just going to have to look at it and deal with it. But at the same time, if you're in that larger organization where that FaceTime can mean a harmful, like a harm to your career, it's how do you come over that while still creating that safety around you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that comes up a lot is the idea of being really intentional with our
Mm,
networks now. Because before, like, even just showing up at the office, you were visible. Folks know that you were there on a day to day basis, right? Like, folks even knew of you or just your presence from just sharing that physical space. But now we need to be really careful of, especially if you're not there on a day to day basis and you're in one of those big organizations where you can just get swallowed up or lost in the shuffle,
mm,
really need to be intentional about who we have in our corner. And that may mean the usual mindset of, okay, let's go to the top of the hierarchy, right? Like, what senior leaders can I get on their radar, make sure that they see me as a mentee or somebody that's in their circle or somebody that they want to advocate for.
mm,
But it's not always based on who's at what level. It's making sure that in the capacity that we want to give, because I think also with this transition to remote work, folks are realizing, right, there's diminishing returns of putting in those extra hours or staying late or all those things that prior used to feel like that's what would really make me show up as a good employee. Now recognizing that folks are just being more aware of setting boundaries and being more intentional with how they spend their time in the workplace, really
mm,
ensuring that we're building relationships with those folks that can open doors for us, that will speak on our behalf in the rooms that we're not in, that even if it's just something as simple as leading a social event or keynoting something internal, making sure that we're taking on these opportunities to stay visible and stay relevant in these firms, and also just professionally, I should say, um, without the need to do it by walking the halls or just being somebody who happens to be seen at their desk at 8 p.m. on a Thursday, proving they're a good employee.
It's funny you say that. A coworker and myself were having a conversation recently and reflecting on exactly what you said on a Thursday night, being there 8 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night. It's dark, and we both had to commute back home, and we're the only ones in the office. And it was just like, I don't want to do that anymore. It's
Yeah.
not so fun. Like, I'm not doing that, right? So, just having that recognition that, yeah, I want something different for my life.
Mm-hmm. Because a lot of folks burnt out, right?
Hmm.
Like we all
mm,
just hit that point. I know I
Yeah,
personally, curious
yeah,
what your experiences were, but I hit that point where I'm like, I just couldn't be bothered.
yeah,
Like there are certain things that I used to be super keen about doing, and maybe part of it too was also being relatively new to an organization, all of that wanting that eager beaver
yeah.
new joiner kind of
Oh, yeah,
perspective. That's been sucked out of me from the
yeah.
pandemic. I will still participate in areas where it has impact and it furthers the work that I'm doing both at Accenture and outside, but I feel like I'm a lot more selective and also being more mindful of the consequence of if I say yes to this, what will the consequence be for me personally, for my
Hmm.
health, my well being, and other parts of my life? And so I don't think it's something that was really top of mind prior to the pandemic, but it has really shifted how I personally think about how I want to spend my time and what I'll say yes to.
Absolutely. As we're getting close to near the end of the conversation, we want to open it up to folks who might have a question or a comment. Feel free to put it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and come on, feel free to do that. We usually like to invite folks to share any thoughts or comments or questions, so we'll create some space for that. And while people are maybe thinking about it, I'm not sure if you have any. Oh, I think, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much, ladies, for such a wonderful conversation. It was very insightful, and I was just like very fortunate to have met with Gwenna recently and connected with her. And this conversation with Shelly, you and Shelmer both really amazing. And I really appreciate how you brought like so many different perspectives. And like I'm a Pakistani. I'm from South Asia. I recently immigrated to Canada. So I've lived in Pakistan, my home country, and then Saudi Arabia, where I was working with my. I was living for the past 8 years, and this last year we've moved here. And like a lot of things, like what you said connected with me, even though like I think being a woman of color, we share it, even though it might not have been in Canada, but it could be any other country. But the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion exist. And it's amazing, like how companies are finally realizing the worth and importance of this and the value of this. And to be honest, mostly my like Gwenna mentioned might just be doing it just for because how DEI is just like maybe a trending thing now, more than like being intentional about it or maybe they believe in it. But I guess like uh, it's still a change, and I'm hoping that it's here to stay and it actually leads to substantive and long-lasting impacts that will, when our next generation, like Shelly, you mentioned you have like a young baby, so when that baby grows up, we leave this world a better place for our children, and it's funny like how we, even when we were growing up in Pakistan, we had access to a lot of like American movies, right? And we grew up watching those. And to be honest, I never even occurred to me to question why we never see any other skin color on TV. Like we just like grew up accepting that. And sometimes like when I feel that I need to educate myself too, even though I've been sort of like on the margins and not like like on the mainstream, but it was just so acceptable the way it's been fed to us, the way that that's all that we've seen. So we just accepted it as a reality, and to finally see that, oh wait, this can be questioned, like we can even ask for our right at the table. And it's amazing with this opportunity, like, and like it's amazing how even like when I was saying that like for us to even ask for somebody like a networking opportunity or a coffee chat, that is something like so out of her league, as like we think, oh my god, can I even do that, like do I even have that space to claim for myself? So it's really amazing for the conversation that you guys like had today. It was very insightful, very encouraging, and I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing to making the world a better place for future generations. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for listening and being a part of the conversation. We really
Hmm.
appreciate hearing from you. And yeah, this is why we're doing what we're doing, because we do want to make a difference in the world. Like, end of story, that's that.
Right. And thank you.
Maybe a question for me for Shalima and Shelley. Knowing
Mhm.
that we're all in this EDI space, I'm curious, knowing that, yeah, there are those moments that are really tricky or they take their toll on you. What parts about this work energize you? What are the challenges or what are the types of problems that you love to solve in this space?
I mean, so for me, I do a lot of facilitating, and I think for me, the biggest, I guess, driver is when you see actual change happen. And so, one of the things that I like to do in facilitating is being able to have people mind themselves for solutions. It's not, I'm not there to just tell you what to do. You have to know your organization, start to look around you and see who's there and who's not there and who you're not hearing from, and perhaps now start thinking about now what are the things you actually have to change. So when I see organizations do that and actually apply the learning to making change, change to structural systems, change to their own processes, procedures, how they're working with people, their own policies, to me, that's the win because it actually has a tangible impact. Um, The other thing, I think, because I do like spend most of my time in that space where I'm helping organizations, and let's be quite honest that that means I'm working mostly with people who probably aren't from marginalized groups. Um, I have to do things like this, where I'm also balancing that out by speaking directly to people of my community, and supporting people directly in that space too. So I think for me, it's being able to balance out where I have that focus and see tangible change. Yeah.
Yeah, Shalima, you left off where I was going to begin, like this space right here. Other volunteer work within Black-led spaces specifically are things that give me life. They give me energy. Being around community members who are just as passionate of this work, or this idea of EDI, it is a bit of a buzz terminology these days. As you mentioned, Gwenna, you know folks who've been doing this work for decades. And when I did my undergrad, a while back. My undergrad was, my minor was sociology, and I don't remember us saying like, EDI or anything like that, but I studied anthropology and this all of this stuff, and it wasn't called the fancy EDI work, but I'm like, yeah, this is all the stuff I know from back in my undergrad, and so it's not new. These concepts are not new. So yeah, just for me, being around folks who get it and you don't have to go through the labor of explaining it, that gives me life. And thinking about the next generation, so my daughter, my niece, my nephews, Shalima's kids, thinking of the next generation, how do we create spaces so that they don't have to work as hard as what we have to work?
Mhm.
That's what gives me life. Yeah. Thank you for asking us those
Mhm.
questions.
I'll just say one thing because, like, as we think about like that next generation. So, one of my children is in grade six, and I did. They had a time like when parents could come in and teach the class something. And so, of course, I bring my own content that I normally do everywhere else. And I'm like, hey, let's see where these kids are. And they were giving better answers than some of the adults that I teach. They knew things. And like, to me, that's so encouraging that there's so many children that have that awareness from an early age. And that's going to really shift things. I think, like, as you see, like, this great resignation, it's about so many things, but it's also about like values. And am I working in a space where my values are aligned? And I think people are seeing if not, then why am I still here? Like why am I putting this onto myself when I can find an organization that does align with my values? And so and that could be for a variety of things. That could be in, where they choose to put their corporate dollars or how they create an environment to work in, not having to deal with microaggressions, etc. But yeah, I think it's just so encouraging, like once we do look at that younger generation and what they're going to want in the future.
I know it's I know we're over time, so I'll keep this quick. But I remember I had a conversation with a student, a young woman of color. She was probably like 19, 20 at the time, and she was asking me about my career in consulting. And she was just like, Gwenna, one of the things that really scares me is feeling like working with organization after organization after organization, although the culture at my own firm or wherever I choose to work may be something that I've subscribed to or something that I've bought into and I feel supported in, I'm going to be exposed to all of these different companies where they may not have the same values. And so her question to me was, Gwenna, when you are in these spaces where you are speaking with client counterparts, you are having these discussions, especially around an EDI lens, if they say something that's off base or you are discriminated against or anything inappropriate happens, do you trust that your senior leadership's actually going to step in and stand up for you? And that got me thinking, absolutely. And really, with that, though, I was just like, hold on, you are 19 years old. You are thinking, I was not thinking about this when I was your age. This was the last thing. I didn't even consider this until after I was in the workplace. And these sorts of interactions were becoming a potential reality. So to your point, Shalima, it's so impressive to me and it's so exciting that
Mm,
this newer generation, they get it. And it's so top of mind and they're willing to ask and have those challenging conversations with folks as they're doing their candidacy, as they're trying to figure out where they want to work and find alignment with their values, that they're so bold in
mm,
engaging in these topics and getting true answers. It's so amazing. It's the coolest thing. And we did not have the guts to do it back when I was looking at my first job. So it's pretty cool to see that evolution and even what's been a short time.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. I'm just mindful of time, so let's ask Gwenna our signature question, Shalima.
yeah. So our signature question to you is, thinking about who you are today, what you're feeling like, your mood, would you consider yourself a red wine
A white
or
a white wine
a fast wine?
or a slow wine?
Okay, I thought it was going to be A or B, but I realize this is a full multiple choice. Oh, honestly, it's a long weekend. I'm ready to turn up. Though, so it's funny, my partner's Jamaican, and he's realized that my fast wine's a little too fast. So I'll say a medium wine from my perspective.
I love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much. This was such a beautiful conversation. I mean, yeah, to me it's a great way to go into this long weekend and just feel so full, like of life and just energy. This was beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Gwenna. Thank you to our audience for sitting in and listening to the conversation and joining, with some of the questions and comments. This has been phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Lima, Shelley, thank you so much for having me and creating this space. It's the entire series has been awesome. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Mama.
We just want to also invite folks to follow us on our social media. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and of course, you can visit us also on our YouTube channel where we post all of the recordings. So, thank you again for coming out, and we hope to see you all next month. We have our session every third Friday of the month.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.